producer Sydney Bowles, and we're here for another installment of BCAT's Town Administrator Update, where we check in on all the big news going on in the town of Burlington. I'm here, of course, with Town Administrator Paul Sagarino. Paul, thank you for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here, Sydney. Thank you.
So, lots to discuss. I want to start in the past a little bit. I think it was last week now, we had a presentation from the Board of Health on some work that they've been doing to better understand some contamination going on along Cambridge Street, sort of by the Shaw's Plaza, Papagino's area. You were at that presentation, as was I. What did you think?
It was a great presentation, and I mean, I have to tell you that our Board of Health has just been on the forefront of cleaning up hazardous waste sites for 40 years. They've been light years ahead of other communities. They've been working on it for many years, and this is just another site that's come to their attention, and they're putting some effort into making sure that it gets cleaned up. And it, as usual, it was a great presentation. They just do a great job. I can't say enough about their efforts to clean up the town. Like I say, it's nothing new. They've been doing this for so long, and again, have always been on the cutting edge of cleaning up these sites. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like, so this has been a Board of Health joint, right? They have been working on this. They got a grant last year to do some of this study. How much do they talk to your office? What's your involvement in that kind of thing?
Very minimal. As you know, the Board of Health is independent here in Burlington, and you know, I work with the director very closely
Susan
Luminello, and the chair, Dr. Weiner. But aside from that, you know, most of their initiatives are generated within the Board of Health themselves. And like I say, it's certainly a department that I don't worry about. They just do a tremendous job with whatever they're working on. So
when you go to those kinds of things, just out of curiosity, is your intention to to learn, to sort of be a part of things? What do you hope to get out of going? Because I'm sure you sort of have your own information on this stuff too, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great learning experience, so I'm always learning. I like to be up to speed with what's going on within the town. And again, like, I'm sure you walked away from that with a lot of new knowledge.
Yeah.
Probably confused on a few things like I was as well, but yeah, it's just great to have an understanding of what's going on and sort of how these agencies work to sort of clean up these sites. So it's a long process, and but you know, there's a lot of sets of eyes on it between the town and the state, so that's a good thing. Like
yeah, it is remarkable. You know, I have been following this for, you know, a year now, I think, and I remember the first time this story came up, I was trying to figure it out. I was like, what, trichloroethylene. I was Googling, like, what are all these chemicals, trying to figure it out. And I mean, just like the expertise that we have at the Board of Health to, you know, to be involved in so many different kinds of things really is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and many of these sites, you know, they were it's not malicious. It's just, you know, 40, 50 years ago, people had a different attitude and didn't understand that it was harmful, you know, for some of these compounds to be in the ground and that they would never go away and things like that. So I don't think there was anything malicious going on back then. It's just that the community, we had industry and businesses, and you know, there's definitely a higher level of understanding of how these compounds can impact the environment at this point. So
yeah, and it seems like from what the Board of Health has been saying, that the companies that are involved now have been pretty responsible about doing their own research and meeting their responsibilities for the sites as well. So that's
well, I think it makes sense, because ultimately it can cost them a lot of money if they're not careful. So you know, I think we do have great businesses in this town, and I do believe that they work really hard to follow all the regulations and keep the community safe.
Yeah. Moving on, there have been a couple of conversations about the future of the Mount Hope Christian School. For folks who don't know, this is a school, an elementary school, or I think pre-K through 5, yeah, so elementary, private school that's been leasing the former Meadowbrook School here in town near the high school. And so they came to you recently to have a little conversation. So what were they interested in talking about?
Yeah, they have about great community member, Mount Hope, a very popular school, very popular choice for many families here in Burlington. They also run church services down there, so a lot of community members participate in that. I mean, every time I visit the school, I run into, you know, members of the community down there, and just a great group of people. So yeah, they have about 6 years left on their current lease option, and I think they're really growing, and you know, they pay great attention to maintaining the school. So I think that it makes sense for them from a business standpoint to sort of understand what the town's intentions are for the building going forward, so that they can adequately plan for their own future. And I think that's what the conversation, Pastor Rick reached out to me to get a conversation going with the select board about what the town's intention is in terms of whether they wish to renew that lease, whether they want to take the building back. And it sounds to me like, Mount Hope just wants a heads up so that they can adequately plan for their future. And, they invest in the building quite significantly, so it doesn't make sense from a business standpoint to invest in a building that you're going to have to move out of in terms of, making capital upgrades to it. So.
Right. So there were a couple of conversations about this at the two most recent select board meetings. And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong in sort of my summary of those conversations. Basically, it sounded like the select board was saying, we're not making any decisions right now. We're just sort of starting to have the conversation. We really love having Mount Hope as a neighbor. We don't want them to go anywhere, but we do have some space needs, so it's worth considering at this time. That's kind of the tenor of the conversation.
I think that's a great summary. I don't think anyone wants Mount Hope to go anywhere or to leave the community, and I think that, in talking to Pastor Rick, I think their intention would be to, if they had to move, to stay within the community. But, the town always has space issues, and we're always looking for space to provide programming. If you think along the lines of recreation, COA. Up at that building, we constantly have friction over use of space and not having enough space. We've opened up the Grandview to programming now, so we're definitely running out of programming space, and office space has gotten a little bit tight over the past few years, where we're putting offices and conference rooms and things of that, and lunch rooms and things of that nature. So I definitely think it's a worthwhile discussion, and again, we'll get to lead the select board to whatever decision they hope to make in the next month or two, and Mount Hope will have the information that they need to adequately prepare for their future needs and their future business. So
right. I mean, it was interesting last night. The conversation was sort of like this lease matures essentially beyond when members of the select board could be serving. We could have 100% different people on the board by the time, in theory, not necessarily, but by the time this lease expires. And so there's decisions that need to be made now that will impact future generations of the town, which is interesting.
Yeah, always. So every select board makes decisions that impact future select boards, and future select boards aren't necessarily bound by those decisions. They can reverse them and change them. In this case, I just think Mount Hope wants a good idea of what to do. I think that they're working on their own plans, and we just need to give them some guidance as to what they should be looking to do in the future, and then they can move on from there. So that's why they approached us. 6 years seems like a long time, but not really if you need to move a school.
Totally, so. Thinking about everything that has to go into that. Speaking about space utilization, another conversation happened at the select board meeting last night that I want to touch base about, and that's some changes that folks are going to see on their water bills, sewer bills as well. One of those is billing cycles. We're moving from semi-annually to quarterly, and that's a part of our connection to the MWRA, so that's just something for folks to be aware of. But the other piece is that water rates are set to go up 9.8% every year for the next 3 years. And that's kind of significant. So we heard from DPW that was in part because of, or significantly due to office space vacancies in town. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's this weird juxtaposition, because I think that everybody wants water conservation, but we also need to sell water in order to pay for the system and the creation of the water. Where we need water revenues to support the costs of making water, but we had water bans over the past few years as well, so it's kind of like this weird push-pull going on. I will say the percentages sound really intimidating, but for about 45% of the residential customers, that's about $18 total on water and sewer on an annual basis. Another big chunk of users, which is our average user of about 60,000 gallons per year, which is actually low compared to other communities. Usually, the benchmark is usually about 90,000. So, we're doing pretty good residentially on conservation, but, they'll be about $33 on an annual basis. And I think it's really important to show the context of, of the 60 communities in eastern Massachusetts, we're in the bottom 4. There's very few communities that offer a cheaper water sewer, and if you looked at the top of that list, and I'd be happy to get that for you, there are many communities where the annual water and sewer bill is 3 or 4 times what Burlington's is. So the water is heavily subsidized by tax revenues, and I think if you look at it in the context, and Brian's list was we were in the 4th from the bottom with our rates for next year versus these other communities' rates from 2 years ago. So,
and presumably those communities have gone up since then as well.
I would say not presumably.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
So I just think it's important. Yeah, the percentages sound intimidating, but the bottom line is we have to pay these costs.
Right.
So we want to at least recover some of those costs from the actual folks using the water. So.
Right, and that makes sense. That $33 a year is great context. I think that's like a lunch out, and that's water for the year. So yeah. I also think it was interesting though, because it really was. It seemed like yesterday the conversation was significantly about a loss of revenue related to a decline in office space usage, which is something that you and I have talked about before as like a post-COVID, something that's still getting worked out. Of Melissa Tentopoulos, our economic director, is working really hard on this, trying to figure out what's going to happen as companies reconsider what their office space footprint needs to look like. So it's a conversation that we're having, and this is one way that it's maybe impacting us that I hadn't foreseen.
Yeah, believe it or not, about 2/3 of the total water revenues come from the commercial sector. So residential was pretty flat over that period of time, and commercial was only about 90% of what it used to be. So, that's a big hit. And again, it's just we have to pay for the systems and the bonds that we use to make the water, and we have to collect money to do so. That money's down, so we're just trying to make an adjustment on that. But, the amount of office space in the future of office buildings in Burlington is something that we think about every day. It's something that keeps us up at night. We've been very fortunate throughout the pandemic. We have first-class landlords and first-class tenants here in town, so most people are fulfilling their lease obligations, but over time those leases will expire. They're often long-term engagements, and what does a company do when that happens? And that's what worries us about the future of. We do have a ton of office space here in town, and not all of it is naturally able to be reused as something else. If you want to move to a science or life science, it's a much different type of building. So not all office buildings are suited to be transformed into that. As there's been a lot of talk in the press, not all office buildings are well suited to be turned into residential. That seems like a logical thing, right? We need residential units, but if you think of how an office building is built with all the windows on the outside, you would have apartments that didn't have much sunlight from the outside. So they're not, most office buildings are not very easy to transform into residential structures either. So
and it's a long-term vision as well to think about those kinds of community level transitions too. So
no, absolutely, and like I say, the office building is something that we think about in our office like on a daily basis. So,
final topic of conversation. Paul Sagarino, town administrator for Burlington. We are talking on the 225th birthday of our community. Today, 225 years ago, February 28, 1799, Burlington was incorporated as a town separate from Woburn. Happy birthday, Burlington.
It's pretty exciting, and I think hopefully the town is aware that...
Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's tomorrow. Wow, I'm so sorry, tomorrow. Wow, tomorrow. I got too excited.
Well, I've been thinking about the cake, so I knew it was tomorrow, but I know the town clerk has really jumped in with both feet in organizing a birthday party for the town, which will take place at the Grandview Farm.
I'm so excited.
Is it 3 to 7?
Yeah.
And there'll be birthday cake for anybody that comes by, so welcome to any residents that come by and help the town celebrate. I think she's going to have some pictures and other little things going on down there as part of the celebration.
Questions that I have. I don't know if you're going to have the answers to these. These are just theoretical questions to pose to the universe. One, or I'll get my answers tomorrow. One, how big is the birthday card? I understand you can sign a birthday card. That's one question. Question two, how big is the cake? I mean, presumably it's going to serve a lot of people.
I think if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, but I think it was a cake that would serve at least 800.
That's a big cake. That's a big cake.
I mean, I'm going to have 2 pieces, so.
As you should. I think that's very warranted.
But we're really excited about it, and like kudos to Amy and her staff. And there's a small 225th celebration committee headed by select board member Priest. I think they're going to try to work the 225th birthday into many of the existing celebrations that we have in town, whether it's the 4th of July parade or Celebrate Burlington. There'll be a little bit of a component there to try to celebrate the birthday. It's a kind of an odd number, 225. I forget, I can't even pronounce what that's called, quincentennial something.
Yeah, I
it has a
now.
really
It's
weird name, but
quintessesca something, yeah.
it's way above my intelligence level, but it's good. We just don't, people don't talk about the history like they used to in the old days. I think at the 200th anniversary, there was a committee of over 100 people that worked for a year on it. And, lifestyles are much busier now, so we have a hard time attracting volunteers. So I think they've come up with some ways to pay homage to the birthday, but won't require a significant cost or a significant level of people power. So we're excited for the upcoming year to celebrate.
Well, I can't wait. I was so excited about the birthday that I forgot it was tomorrow. I was just like I was way out over my skis. But anyway, Paul, thank you as always for taking a couple minutes. It's always great to chat.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Sydney.
All righty. That's been another episode of our Town Administrator Update, and thank you as well for watching.